based on what we've heard already today, has in mind key questions where either you're doing something that you'd like to share with everybody else, or you've got a real issue, a real question to deal with. And as I mentioned, in my view, there's many of you in this room we've worked with over the past 10, 20 years, getting to where we are today. But I'm really happy to have a group of what I consider big thinkers in this space. They have both the experience and the vision and the knowledge to really push boundaries, because if you took anything out of this morning's early session, it's we got to change. What we're doing right now is not working. It's not working with existing hospitals. It's not working with new hospitals. We're not going in the right direction. We're not meeting targets. And again, I'm going to ask you to forgive me at the end of the day where we talk a little bit about the climate crisis, what it means and what's coming, and the fact that we all have what we're referring to here as, okay, yeah. So there's two ways you can contribute your questions. One is please raise your hand, and it's great exercise for Michael because he's got a microphone and he comes galloping over. And keep in mind we're live streaming, so we got people outside this room who are interesting. The other thing, we showed you Slido at the beginning. We're going to use Slido in a significant way to collect people's feedback towards the end of the day. But let Gillian talk about how you can use it right now with these sessions. And if you're shy, kind of imagine, you can type your questions into Slido and we'll be watching those and we can feed them in as well. But Gillian, help us with this.
Just it won't take long. We're all on our phones. I see lots of people on their phones. So if you feel like you have a question partway through, we will be monitoring the questions. This will help also for the live stream, so we can see questions from the live stream on Slido. So you should be able to, if you scan the QR code and join using that code right there, that will get you right to the question and answers. It's just an open question and answer, and I will be reading them out at the question and answer period. Bear with us because this is our first shot at this. We're trying to enter into 2024 technologically. So, but yes, we'd please appreciate any questions anytime through this. Thank you.
So picking up on that, all of you on the live stream, use your phones to put the questions in and we'll read them out within the room here. Going back again to welcoming, and again, you know these people, you know the bios. I'm not going to spend a long time on introductions, but we have Cliff Harvey, and who's now responsible for the big redevelopment at St. Mary's. We've got Andrew Blair, who now is with Baycrest, having seen Sinai Health through so much with both new hospitals and existing hospitals. Kyle Robinson, whose ambition within Sick Kids still takes my breath away, but lots to share about the pragmatic as well as the vision. And we absolutely welcome Anita back. These are our panelists to take what we've learned so far and think about where are we going from here. So thinking as we start about Gillian's ladder, the staircase to heaven, all of the organizational things that have to be done and the issues around alignment. Is the organization aligned? Are the right people? Is the thinking all together? Is the green team together? About resources, really wanted to start with you, Andrew, if I could, with looking first internally, your direct experience, and then we'll look at externally about where we go from there. Where you've had successes with energy efficiency in the different settings that you've had over the past many years, what does success look like, and what are the kind of things that get in the way to achieve the kind of efficiency and environmental levels that you've always strived for?
Hello. That was a very long question. So I'll start by saying, Anita touched on some of this earlier. There are, of course, multiple challenges in our industry, lots of competing priorities. Resources are always a key factor in getting anything done. But, you know, in the 3 different hospital healthcare settings that I've been in my 20 plus years, having champions, having somebody on your team outside of you at the various level of leadership that you're at, that can actually get into the weeds, find the facts, help you build those business cases, and help you grow a conscience within the organization is key. It could be 1, it could be 2, it could be a team. It has to start somewhere, and it has to start with somebody who's got a passion for getting into the weeds. Because as Ian, you've shown on the screen, the numbers will change. The complexity will change, our buildings will age, and our systems will age. And so keeping on top of all of those parameters and continuing to champion the next solution to get us back on track takes people, takes resources, takes dollars, and those dollars will never come if you haven't put a compelling business case in front of a senior executive team.
And pick up on the idea of the challenges. What have been the 1 or 2 things that consistently get in the way?
Time, when, and sometimes in the most crazy circumstance, year end or whatever, resources become available and they finally want to look at your business case. Can you actually accomplish what you wanted to do in that very slim amount of time to spend those dollars? You want to say yes, you want to grab those dollars. But if they're going to end at a time that doesn't let you deliver the project, it may end up being a failure in many people's eyes. So you don't want to put yourself in a failure state, because that will put you far back in getting those resources again and getting prioritized. I think the other thing too is the deep dive study into your systems. Again, some of the low hanging fruit is just in retrofitting the systems, just getting them back to a place where you can manage and control them the way they were intended. And that time and effort to audit, to study, and then be prepared to do something when those dollars become available, sometimes that can get in the way too, because just taking the money, starting the project, and finding out that there are 10 other projects that have to come out of this to make this work and to get those savings can derail your momentum.
And Cliff, pick up on that in your current setting, which is the redevelopment space. So again, you've gone through the whole South Niagara experience. You're now looking at the St. Mary's situation. As you've gone through all of this, what does success look like, and again, what gets in the way?
A success of our new development is a shovel in the ground to get it going from that perspective. And I think the difference between the South Niagara project and the KW site, and there's only five, or I'll say the Waterloo region. There's only really 5 or 6 years difference between when we started South Niagara to now it's in the ground, to starting the new hospital for Kitchener-Waterloo. But what's interesting is that the world has changed again, particularly in the construction industry and what's being built today. And part of that is the fact is that we don't have the resources to build these massive hospitals. So now we're starting to look at, okay, well, we're going to build more phased approach. The reason I'm saying that is we now have to keep facilities running longer. Right now, my job now is not only looking at building a brand new hospital, but also doing what we call a coping strategy in the existing facilities. We're going to keep them up and running. So Grand River, the KW site will keep going. The Freeport site will keep going. St. Mary's, which is probably one of the oldest parts of the system, will eventually be decommissioned itself and moved into the new facility. So one of the things that we're doing is we're doing the reports that we have to look at to study what we want to achieve in the new hospital. Particularly, we did this for the South Niagara project. And if anybody's interested, that report is actually on the website to set the goals and standards that we were going to put into the hospital, particularly around our energy targets, around greenhouse gas emissions, all the things that we wanted to do from a sustainable environmental point of view. We're doing the same thing for the KW, we're merging, so I don't know what NewCo company we're going to be, but for the Kitchener-Waterloo Hospital. But what's interesting is everything that we're doing, we're moving it back into the facilities. So this is just not about talking now about what we're going to do for the new hospital. This is what we're going to do for all our facilities. And that's an important aspect because right now, the environmental sustainability, it's not on the radar screen of our boards or our leadership. And this is one of the, I'll say this is one of the challenges, but also one of the successes is that when you do get a new hospital, you get a new pot of money. You're not going in asking for operational dollars to do these environments. You're actually out of a big pot of money, which you can then spread out and do these initiatives. From my perspective, that's big because we were just at the board and they recognize that with the design principles, which include sustainability goals, they need a governance model in place. And that really clicked to me, which it realizes that you got the attention. They came back as a board and said, we need to have a governance model to do these design work and measure them. And it was like, that was a huge success. Right there, that was last Wednesday, and I realized that is what is needed. And what we've done is we've included the existing facilities in there. So we were able to bring that model very much, which was shown on the screen, to life in for Kitchener-Waterloo from that perspective. That's a huge win. That's going to be a big success because now we can go back and look at the facilities that we're going to do.
And every work we do, and I work with Andrew at North York, every time we touch a building, we want to make sure we're achieving those sustainable goals. We're making sure that we're just not fixing the system, but we're making it better. For interest, how many people in the room, how many hospitals in the room have got a redevelopment kind of coming to fruition in the next 10 years? There's quite a lot of you, aren't there? Yeah, so think for a moment about all the things you've got going on and what questions you might want to ask. But Carl, let me turn to you on the same basis. You've got this downtown campus and again, enormous ambition in terms of what that is becoming. Same kind of question, the successes, the challenges. Can you share some of those? Challenges and successes. But to what Cliff mentioned, it's really looking at from our massive project that's called Project Horizon, is looking at that, new versus renew, and working with the government because these budgets are massive. And so we see the size of these redevelopment budgets and trying to keep them in line. Things have changed since COVID. It's been very challenging in regards to, keeping these multi-billion-dollar projects and getting the approvals, and therefore very quickly you can see how trying to reach certain environmental sustainability goals become more and more challenging, especially when we talk about trying to hit, LEED platinum, LEED gold. So many things need to be cut out. So it's kind of seeing what can we do to push that needle. And so for me, it's always been really pushing buy-in from leadership. I've been very lucky to have a CEO that really supports environmental sustainability and making sure we hit those goals. Also working very closely with our foundation. What I want to bring up is really interesting. My foundation contacted me and asked me a very pointed question. And the question was really about saying, is sustainability a trend? And that's kind of like, what do you mean by this? And it was a good question, though. They said, listen, we are seeing within the States and also in Canada, EDI, environmental sustainability initiatives being cut out from a lot of major companies, saying basically they're not going to hit the 2030 targets.
To also making sure shareholder value was there. All of a sudden, these budgets and these departments were being dwindled down. And so they're kind of going, what's your thoughts on this? Because they really want to support in regards to going there and finding funding from it. But where they're seeing a lot of these articles where massive organizations were cutting back on here. And so it really had me think more deeply about that to kind of say, yeah, we're facing massive headwinds. And I'll like it to almost a marathon. We're at mile 15 where the lactic acid's building up. And so today you're talking a lot about, what we're not hitting our targets. But I feel right now we're at that stage right now in regards to this journey where things are getting really tough and difficult. And I think for us, especially at Sick Kids, it's really leaning back on what got us there. It was that engagement and that change management was helped got us, our environmental sustainability strategy forward. We're just finishing up our GHG reduction roadmap that's going to really help us, lead through and get to the next level. But in regards to really pushing on the development side, getting back to your question, is kind of figuring out from the successes of past redevelopments talking to those ones where they didn't really hit their goals and find out what happened, and really leverage the fact that we're a bit further in where we were in our redevelopment right now, but then we can make that a positive thing by looking at those who were successful in getting the buildings up, but maybe having some challenges in regards to hitting their targets that they hoped for when they first put those buildings up. So sitting here today is kind of thinking about who do I reach out to kind of come and talk to me and my team and almost do an audit, you know, and kind of sit back and say, hey, where are you guys in your existing buildings? Because there's an individual you mentioned, I'd love to get his name, who walks around, and before he was saying 1.2 was his target. Now his target's 700,000.
It's Alan Kelly, yeah.
Yes, I would love to have him come and talk to my team and I, and teach us to have that same lens, as well as then reach out to other redevelopments, other hospitals who finished their redevelopments, and kind of say, where did you struggle in regards to your contract management and where you're trying to hit your targets? Because if we can learn before we actually put the shovel in the ground for the next phase of Project Horizon, maybe we can either prevent hitting those same hurdles, right? And figure out ways so that we're successful. So 10 years from now, when I'm sitting in front of you, you're looking at us and saying, hey, you guys did it, right? Versus what's going on.
Yeah, like David Stolte there, yes, that's we did it. And how much of that is hit? Maybe the most shocking thing we've looked at today is the fact that, you know, we're building new hospital after new hospital in jurisdiction after jurisdiction, and they're all so far off where current practice is. And it may be then that the National Energy Code is just out to lunch, but there's a few broke ranks and actually delivered, you know, Humber River and Peel Memorial and Cortalucci Vaughan. So it comes back to, we do know how to do it. So how can we miss the mark so often? So I like to put that out to you. Those of you who have new developments underway, thoughts, questions for people who are in the midst of this and have lived with the product. Any thoughts from the audience on questions you'd like to ask right now around redevelopment, around new developments? Yes. There goes Michael. I'll also ask the people who are on the live stream, not in this room right now, if you want to type your any questions into Slido, we'll pick those up after this comment. Hang on just for a second, Joe. Was one back here, and then Michael is going to do the 20-yard dash across the room.
Hello, my name is Pierre Yacchetti. I'm the Director of Energy, Environment, and Climate Change at Island Health, otherwise known as Vancouver Island Health Authority.
Yep.
My question kind of is coming off of the previous question around guidance. So with the health authorities in BC, we all get together and we've created guidance for new healthcare facilities or redeveloping existing facilities. And there's a lot of thou shall in those guidance. There's also a lot of nice to have. And at the end of the day, it's often a money decision. I was wondering what you think the value of this sort of top-down approach, or if you have anything like that. I really only know the BC Health Authority space, so I'm not up to speed on other jurisdictions. But I find that high-level guidance is very powerful. So my question, I guess, is, do you see any value in that, or do you have anything like that?
Cliff, you're always talking about, do you tell them, or do you ask them, or do you suggest? Yeah.
Well, actually, maybe like a very quick update around the Canadian Standards Association. One of their tasks recently, and Annika from CSA is here, is they were asked to look at all their standards, and we're particularly around the healthcare facilities, around how would climate change, environmental resiliency impact what we do in the standards. So they're actually reviewing all the standards and updating them to give you that governance and guidance. And the one thing about the standards is, as all professionals understand, it's more than just guidance. If you don't do it, you're held liable at a court of law. They're saying, well, why wouldn't you do this? Particularly around mechanical, electrical standards from that point of view. So that's the good news. I'll give you sort of the guidance from that perspective. The second one is, and it's kind of a perplexing one for me, but The Ministry of Health last week or a week before came out, and they're going to renew and look at the standards for healthcare, particularly on space standards. And they're going to go through an exercise to hire consultants and develop what Z8000, the Canadian Standards Association, an Ontario-made version of it. But it perplexes me because, and I use this analogy all the time, it's sort of like bringing a sword to a gunfight. That's not the problem in our industry right now on building these hospitals. We have issues with the resources and the construction. We have issues we're talking about today, which I think is a much greater one. Standards are already standardized. They're already the right space. But we need better guidance. Going back to the question, we need better guidance, and we need our leaders to step up, particularly around, as we've seen with CSA, stepping up to look at their guidance. We also need governments to step up and give us better guidance and direction to help us get the support of our boards and the funding associated with it. So I'm going to participate with the standards development with the Ministry of Health, and I'd like to see and put a push on there that we get some more guidance around these issues that we're discussing today.
Kyle, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's important, and thanks, Cliff. I think it's top down and bottom up. I'm a sandwich guy. I think that the bottom up part, what the people want, the people get. And so the more you get those teams, and Anita alluded to, so I'd love to hear Anita's thoughts. When you, from a healthcare standpoint, when you get the masses of your organization believing in something and wanting something, those at the top then understand that they have to meet those commitments and also understand the importance of those commitments. Because everything within healthcare, unfortunately, we talk about funding in a minute, a yes or a no somewhere is a yes and a no elsewhere, right? And so that's the challenge that leadership has had, something that I've realized over my journey, right? So therefore, it's kind of you're looking at the bottom and saying, get the buy-in there, the ones at the top then in regards to maybe a leadership within your organization, leadership who sets standards, and I think Cliff really talked towards that. Then we move towards getting to that sweet spot of meeting what we want and kind of really hitting what sustainability really is, that balance of things. So that's how I'm pushing things, and I really want, I think that's one of the best ways to get towards that. But Anita, once again, I would leverage, once again, I guess, giving you a plug, utilize her team, what they're doing. Some new things I just learned from her discussion and kind of saying, bring in those experts to have those conversations, because you will be amazed. The buy-in from the physicians and the clinical side has so much leverage. And to me, that's that ground, right? But at the same time, they have a direct connection to that top leadership.
Yeah, pick up on that if we could, Anita. You mentioned Accreditation Canada, and that's where some of our early conversations when we were planning for this is carrots and sticks. But if it's the law, you have a way of doing it. So talk a bit about where that, like, how do we get people to change?
Sorry about that. So I think, so I spend a lot of time communicating appropriately and communicating to people who are actually making the decisions, because I don't really make any decisions. So I think it's important for our leadership and for the board to see what speaks to them. And so accreditation is a very powerful motivator. So it's really fantastic that they put these new leadership and governance standards. But again, it's not required organizational practices yet. So I think we can work with Accreditation Canada and HSO to increase those. The other thing is to actually speak to the decision makers and leaders about what is important to them. And for us at Trillium, it's actually incredible capacity pressures. So we have fantastic data scientists who actually have local data to show you if local air pollution increases, how much more are your beds that you're going to need for respiratory illnesses, things like chronic diseases, diabetes, heart failure, which are all related to climate. And you show that to your leaders and say, we're building the biggest hospital in Canada. It is not going to be enough if we still continue on this climate destruction that we have, and maybe we should change that. And I think that's what really motivates us, is that we are going to be in trouble in less than 10 years. We are not going to be able to take care of the patients that we serve. And we're in the health business. The climate crisis really is just a health crisis. And we already can't service our population. It is only going to get worse. So speaking to the decision makers on what actually matters to them, in short timeframes. I think we've had some success with that.
Julian,
Can I
yeah, of course, Cliff.
really, really quickly,
Yeah.
because I just want to go back, Kyle's analogy of the sandwich. I'm watching bring the lunch out, so I was getting hungry. But the thing is that I like the bottom and top. I talked about CSA standards. I talked about the government, but also from the bottom. And it's going back to the earlier question too. We do a report at the beginning of our project that states what our goals are going to be, and that's what we measure all the way through. That in a way becomes our guidance for the organization. It goes all the way up. It's a board approved document. So if you don't have that guidance available, create it and set your goals, set your standards, set what you want to accomplish. Don't always rely on somebody else telling you to do it yourself. And I think that's a bottom up approach. And the top one comes from the government.
Love it. Jillian, can we pick up on questions from the outside? And Mike Rohan, if I may, I like a few words about what's happening in New York after we hear from the great outdoors here.
Okay, lots of questions online, so bear with me. So the first one, and you may have answered this, and maybe if you have any nuances that to add to this question, because it is about the team, is how big are your energy and sustainability teams, and how do you make sure they're correctly engaged, as you mentioned, through this whole process, through the construction planning and execution? It's a long process.
So they will swell when needed. They will decrease when needed. I think like any planning team, you grow the membership, whether it's actual bodies as a part of the project cost or subject matter experts that come in because they're champions to specific things. And then again, as the project gets through that planning phase all the way through to implementation, you slowly start to let people go back to their everyday jobs. And then you hope that they stay on and be part of your sustainability team that's ongoing.
Yeah, I want to come back to you on that one later, Andrew, around like continuity. I think one of the things I find remarkable with you is you put together a whole bunch of allies and how you obtain continuity from that. And I've made a note here so I won't forget, but go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, at Sick Kids, our sustainability team is small but mighty, trying to grow it. One of the things that we did though, and I put forward, is on our capital requests. So basically, anytime you submit for capital request funding, the sustainability team is also part of that review. So any equipment or systems that go through, they also get to give their input. So before it was only facilities, but I separated. So I wanted to make sure from a facility standpoint, can it be delivered from a project? Yes. Can it be delivered from a facility standpoint, but also from a sustainability, maybe energy, waste, whatever it may be. So their voices are being heard there, but it also lets other individuals within the organization understand that, hey, you have to have that lens if you want to get your project or capital request approved from that standpoint. But it's great. We had a great conversation a couple of weeks ago, Andrew and I, and seeing the challenges that VPs have. And it's just taking that lens and reaching out to other leaders to kind of understand where are your roadblocks and some of your challenges. And so Andrew gave me some great insights in regards to things, as you said, where there's growth and then there'll be that reduction. But understanding as a leader that kind of happens, right? So you have the expansion and contraction will happen with your teams, but maximize those teams and get them involved in regards to approvals and the approval process so that the organization understands that sustainability isn't just a one-time thing, kind of what I alluded to before, but it's now becoming part of your process in everyday life.
Let's swing across to Mike Rohan if we could. Mike, can you just give us a bit of an update from New York State, New York City, around carrots and sticks and how effective you're finding them to be?
Sure, but I think first, my brain is going full speed right now. And I'm thinking about negotiation, coalition building, collaboration. But I wrote in bigger letters, cohesion. And I think that's a lot of what we're looking at now. But in New York City in particular, the stick approach is pretty heavy. We have fines that will start this year at $268 per ton for any level of carbon above a threshold set point. And that set point is tied to the occupancy of the building.
Just for context, Mike, there are 26 hospitals in our database that have more than 1,000 tons of emissions reduction potential. So that's like $268,000 a year, US.
Correct. Yeah, so it's a very significant stick. We do have carrots in the form of incentives, but there's a lot of, and what you're speaking about right now, a lot of disconnect between utilities, infrastructure, and how we can accommodate some of the changes that we recognize we need. How do we electrify, for instance, when the grid doesn't have capacity? So there's a lot of elements that are coming to a confluence right now. And you mentioned conundrum before. That's a term we use quite regularly, is the conundrum between the varying laws, because New York State has the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act, which stipulates certain reductions in carbon across the state from a production perspective. Then the federal government has a different set of regulations. It's more voluntary, but it's, for us, we agreed to a 50% reduction by 30. Yes, I'm laughing. So, we have a lot of these conundrum related, but then we also have the challenges of climate change, yet we have the patient in the center, reliability, resiliency, redundancy, the requirements that we all face. So, this discussion right now is terrific because a lot of the same challenges, but I'm picking up some new insights.
And Mike, you mentioned cohesion. Can you just elaborate a bit on that? What are you trying to bring together here?
Cohesion among, right here, you're a lot more cohesive in Toronto and Ontario and in Canada than we are. So we have a hard time speaking with the utilities. We have a more difficult time speaking with the state government agencies. So the cohesion among the hospitals, we're doing very well. Over the last 5 years, we've been meeting every other week with every single hospital in the metropolitan area. But the cohesion that's lacking is among the other entities, governmental and utility primarily.
That's great, thank you. Back to the room for a moment. Michael, you pick the raised hands. I always get in trouble.
Ian, while you're asking a question, can I just go back to the team?
Yes, please.
Question? I think it's fundamental. I'll challenge the thinking behind this, but I think there's a better success rate if the sustainability or the environmental is built into the DNA of the organization and the team, and there is not a sustainable team or an organized. It's everything we do is sustainable. So when I'm thinking about who on my team is responsible for it, it's my entire team. It's in my FF&E, the procurement of the equipment. One of the biggest impacts you can have is actually the amount of equipment bought, and looking at procurement from that point of view. Our facilities management team looking at the future operations. So they're all given goals. It's all part of our report of what we want to achieve. But if you ask me to point out the sustainable team, I'll point to my entire team, everybody on the project, because that's a goal. I think that's a really important, it's a mind shift from maybe 5-10 years ago, where you would have somebody responsible for checking, making sure everything's being done in a sustainable way, to making it the responsibility of everybody in the organization to deliver on it.
Yeah, I remember Kathy Gerwig at Kaiser Permanente would say that when you bake that third lens into the decision-making process, so it's function, it's budget, and it's sustainability, do these things work? Then you're there, aren't you? That's Gillian. Other questions from?
Right over here.
Oh, I apologize. Yes.
Oh,
here we
no
go.
worries.
We'll get you.
Lisa Van Lint, University Health Network. I have a question actually related to buildings. And we know that with the climate crisis that we always have high cooling needs, but we also now have high heating needs and high cooling needs. More and more, these are an important thing. We also know that buildings that are mostly glass towers have a harder time with this because the insulation is just not nearly as good. Like the worst wall is better than the best window. Yet increasingly, we see that patient towers are being built, and they're being built as glass towers, baking in these high heating and high cooling needs. How do we get away from the glass tower?
Anybody?
Yeah. No, this is great. I was actually had the privilege of being in London a couple of weeks ago. And this is one of the discussions. And I think the Europeans are doing a much better job than we are right now. I think it's really pushing our designers and our architects to think differently and working with them. I think, once again, very, how do I say, politely, because we have some really great donors. I think it's also understanding our donors for hospitals to understand that they are donating hundreds of millions of dollars. And so a lot of times I think that does influence how sexy, for lack of a better word, our buildings are, which means then these glass jewel boxes, right? And it's kind of saying these things aren't sustainable from that standpoint. And we have to kind of realize that some really great architecture from 20, 30 years ago made a lot of sense. Reduction in window size, but changing how those windows are in regards to how they're laid out can still let in a lot of natural light, but not build completely inefficient air, water leakage buildings that we have today. So it's kind of pushing that. And once again, working, I'll go back to a very diverse team to figure out from the beginning of when you have massive donors who want something looking amazing because it's their name on it, changing how our designers look at that and realizing how do we build more efficient and sustainable buildings from that standpoint, so we don't build these glass jewel boxes that, once again, I'll go back to our housekeepers hate having to clean, but also for our facilities operators later on to manage and take care of, because yeah, within months of turning over a building, you start having water penetration, leakage, failures in those glass buildings, and then also that's construction costs. We end up buying stuff from Italy. Once again, I believe in open markets, but it'd be amazing a lot of times that we procure stuff across the pond and have it ship over, and then once it fails, you know, it takes forever to get that glass replaced.
Go ahead, Cliff.
I was going to say, one thing is that if you really set your energy targets and you looked at the charts and you want to be up there at the top, you did that.
And then you can come and do energy modeling on a glass building. You're pretty well guaranteed you're not going to get both, right? So if you're really serious about the energy modeling, that starts to inform your openings and your design of your building. And that's got to be done early in the project. If you don't do it, there's no way you'll ever get that sort of energy that you want, that marker you want in a design that's designed for the aesthetics rather than for trying to achieve your goals. Yeah, the energy target's a great discipline. You know, it's that's right. I love this, and this, but you can't have it because you've got to be there. I think this question has a remedy. Yeah, thank you, Paul. This is a great discussion. I have a question for Anita. Look at you've got HVAC schedules and setting up those on those systems. There's been what I'm sort of hearing is there's a collaboration happening on the clinical side. There's a collaboration with the facility teams. The facility managers are actually currently sitting there. They've been given those projects through the ECDM plan in the last 5 years, 10 years, but there's been less success because probably there's no collaboration happening with the clinician. What advice would you give them? How could they approach a clinician about those projects starting with? And like when we sort of talk to the hospitals, ORS as being one of the sort of hardest to implement the schedules because there's large stakeholders in that compared to ambulatory care, admin space, and the healthcare facility. So, which is again, we kind of going on the other end of it, but it's still the opportunity to collaborate with the clinicians. But sometimes there's not clear paths to the facility managers and directors to approach the clinicians. And then, how do you take that approach to talking to clinicians and take that full collaborations between clinicians and the facilities to upper management? What advice would you have for those managers, directors sitting in this room right now? They have projects there and then they want to sort of implement those and need the help of clinicians to do that.
Clinicians can be really hard to engage. And I think a lot of that is awareness of what can be achieved if they actually cooperate. So I think communicating that, and perhaps that has to be communicated at a higher level than just, say, the chief of surgery in the OR, say for HVAC or setbacks. And if that does come through a higher level, like the chief of staff of a hospital, or it comes from your CEO, then that becomes part of the job of the chief of surgery to collaborate. And often, and I've had this problem too, is that I'm talking to the wrong person, right? And it's hard to figure out who the right person is to speak with. There are a lot more clinicians for various reasons who are getting much more interested in environmental sustainability. And so If you find someone in your organization who's in a leadership position from the clinical side who's not really that engaged, you can probably find someone else who can make that person engaged. And that can be done simply through education. If you say, you know, we're going to take 20,000 cars off the roads. If you just help me get a schedule and work with your division chiefs and tell them, no, you're not going to have more joint infections if we do this, then and it doesn't take a lot of time. It's really finding the right person. If it's Ontario, our group can find the right person for you. I don't think people in facilities should waste time. Just go to somebody who is a champion, and that person can reach out to the right person. I hope that gives you a roadmap, because so much energy is spent in finding who should you talk to make that decision. Because we have the guidelines, it should be done.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely right. Having that multidisciplinary team, finding the champions within those pockets of subject matter expert groups does massive to affecting change. Because if you can get somebody who works in the environment to explain the nuances of the risk they feel, because they just feel risk, change is risk, and they want to know that the patients and the populations they serve will not be at risk because you're making changes, because they see the operations team as the team behind the scenes, but in the trenches, in that space, they live it, they own it, they want to see success in their spaces. So you have to get the champions to align, to educate everybody who's not on board, to invest that time to get over the hump, and then to create reasonable policies that show that if an iteration has to come, the fallback plan is to do this, so that there is a fail-safe to the ORs needing to run after hours, more than maybe one room. Today we need three, what do we do? Who will do it? How will we do it? If those policies and procedures are in place and everybody gets on board, you usually can affect change.
Yeah, that was the, go ahead, Calvin. Yeah, no, I love that. And I think, and you said something earlier that resonated with me. It's speaking the language of those champions. And so she mentioned a lot about patient care. And one of the things that, you know, talking about champions and maybe that we can do better, because I hope this is more about thinking of solutions than just us talking to you. It's speaking that language. So we talked about patient care. So we saw last year, we were here, we saw forest fires within Northern Ontario, across Europe. So therefore, you know, air quality was massively impacted. And we saw basically almost all the hospitals smell with barbecue, and especially I love barbecue. It was not a good thing. Now this year, this seems better. We saw Toronto get crushed. How much was it? I think it was $1 billion in regards to insurance and claims, difficulty people getting into work. It's not something that I was leveraging, kind of saying, listen, of course, patients, and one of the things being sick is no sense, you know, making kids healthier, putting them back into an environment that's bad. But also the lens I'm trying to talk to my team, and the solution here is realizing that we're also part of that solution. If we are being impacted by air quality, you can't get to work, or your team can't get to work and perform. If you can't get to your area because there's flooding happening, right, with to you, but now to patient care. If everything back to patient care and delivery, all of a sudden now you're speaking the language of multiple people. Thinking out loud, starting about, well, hey, what about HR, right? Hadn't I engaged HR correctly from the environmental sustainability to say, there is opportunity for you, because if staff aren't coming in, if staff are getting sick because the environment's making them sick, that's the impact to the organization from that standpoint, right? And how are we supporting it from a resilience standpoint, right? We have to look at more organizational resilience and the impact of environmental sustainability to resilience from that standpoint. So talking your champion's language, I think that's going to really help. So then that way we can find out better ways by doing this energy project, by doing this waste management project. It helps us, but also helps you, because we help not impact patients, and also our staff also necessary to make sure that we deliver that care. Yeah, I want to stay with this interdisciplinary collaboration piece because it fascinates me. I'll come back to Anitra in a moment, but yeah, back to the audience, Matt. Back here in a moment. Okay. Thanks. Aaron Wooders, Trillium Health Partners. My question is more for the gentleman from New York. I'm just curious what those fees or fines are going to go towards. What are they going to fund? For the city or the Department of Finance in New York City, and not necessarily towards sustainability goals. energy reduction goals. So yeah, that has been a challenge that we've identified as well. That was an interesting question when we had a pre-meeting on this, that is the government really going to tax itself? Because here, if they find one of our hospitals, where's that funding supposed to come from? It has to come from the ministry, because that's the way the world works. So intriguing little conundrums, but Matt had a question here, and so it's good for him. Good morning. Conversation's incredible. I'm gonna sort of lean into the sandwich analogy. And healthcare organizations are massive, and a big sandwich needs a toothpick to hold it together. If that toothpick were the conduit from the bottom to the top, what does that conduit actually look like in a healthcare organization to make sure that the opportunities identified become a reality through the approval structures at the top? Because we can sit here and talk about an opportunity here, here, and here, and some of those are going to get implemented. Low-hanging fruit, operational, like each layer is going to have some sort of control and some opportunity to implement these changes. However, eventually you're going to have to get to the top. What is that conduit in a healthcare structure so that the larger conversations, the big capital projects get the attention and the approval that are being identified at various layers? Matt, is that lines of communication you're thinking? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Or reporting structure. Whether you have an environmental sustainability committee, where does that report into? Does it report into a resources committee that goes into to the board? How do you get these decisions made within a healthcare organization? Because we're talking about a lot of benefit things here, but the theme that always comes up is multi-stakeholders, and then we're missing but how, right? Let's give that one to Anita if we get
So the way we've structured it at our hospital is that our environmental sustainability committee does have an executive sponsor. So that goes right up to senior leadership. So so she's aware of very small projects of replacing some plastic equipment in the OR, all the way to part of some things in redevelopment. And so I think there is several layers of communication. There's also, it's a very multidisciplinary team within our sustainability committee. So we have food services who are increasing plant-based menus, and that does go up the chain. But that is a challenge. And of course, senior leadership can't be aware of everything, but at least we have committees that we can present to, so that there will be some broad awareness at the leadership table.
Andrew.
Yeah, Anita's said it very well. If your organization is at a maturity level where you have a full dedicated committee, even all volunteers, as long as there's a committee with an accountability back up to a senior leader level and then up to strategic planning and board, then that pipeline is very simple. But when you don't have those, and many of us are still not there, you've got to start to make those bridges by getting those easy wins first, which gets active engagement with the other levels, and then using the wins out of that to promote the success. So whether it's reusable sharps getting changed out for the organization, might not get you massive dollars in doing it, but a massive win in success in getting rid of and diverting waste. Food service waste streams, the various waste streams within the building, as much as the money talks, it's getting everybody to see that our sustainable goals as an organization make sense and that we need to continue forward. Because then you'll have the opportunity when those dialogues are happening to really start to talk about structure and strategic planning and getting something on your strategic goals of the organization. Senior leaders don't want to put something on their strat plan that they don't believe they can be successful at, because we're all accountable to those strategic goals that go to the board. So it has to be something we will succeed at, or it's not going there. That's a key. There's no way around it. We're all accountable, and so you've got to get the wins to get the buy-in so that everybody else at that senior table feels like this will be a successful thing.
Jillian, can we check with the live feed again, please? Yeah, of course.
I should have said too that I think this is a great study for Accreditation Canada and HSO, right? So it's in their leadership and governance standards. So have a real sustainability committee, not a green team. And so if you have that, you get a tick box with Accreditation Canada. If you don't, you don't pass. That's where we have to make the change.
And accreditation is great that they finally recognize that and master planning, because finally we're having those dialogues and conversations. It's not out of the way, but once it becomes an ROP, it will really be successful, because we need it to be something that everybody is accountable to deliver. Right now, we're aspirational still. We show them what we do at whatever level we do it, but we need them to start getting data, put a framework in, and then say, these are one of those things you must deliver. We're at least on the agenda now. We've got to have a dialogue.
Yeah.
No, it's been delayed.
And it's no longer off the side of the desk. If this stuff matters, we got to formalize it. Jillian, questions from outside?
So we have a number of questions. I will not be able to get to all of them, but I really appreciate them, and we will try to get them answered and back to you after the forum. I have a great question. How do we attempt to address the fundamental gap of the political will and focus of short-term 4 to 5 year cycles versus the long-term needs of sustainability?
This is the government question, I think. This is.
No, it was a question from the audience.
No, I'm sorry, that this is the question of if changes in government, if the whole game changes, then how do you manage through that?
But it's also every CDM plan is 5 years, strategic plans are 5 years, everything's on a 5-year cycle, right?
Yeah.
Kyle.
No, great question. Actually, Matt and I were just talking with the ECDM. So from the government standpoint, understanding that governments come and go and have their own mandates, it's understanding, once again, I think going back to the analogy of speaking in one's language. If you have a government in power that may not be so much in the jargon and pushing forward on the environmental sustainability, there are wins that they see, going back to what Andrew's saying, understanding what they potentially are looking for and how to leverage that, understanding that it may not be directly what we want and what we need right away. It's about understanding, are we trying to get funding? So I think that's what the ultimate thing is, trying to look for funding. You know, grants is, I think most hospitals are looking for. We need free money, you know, getting financing, all that stuff. CFOs are under a tremendous amount of pressure right now within healthcare, something that I think all of us have to better understand and speak that language, and then therefore understand what is the government looking for and how do we unlock those potential funding opportunities, and also make sure that they're hitting their targets. Going back to what Andrew said, right? The current government right now has their own targets and own mandates. How do we speak their language to help support some of that in order to get what we need to hit our mandates right now? So I think that's one of the ways to leverage it. When it comes to the ECDM, I think Matt and I were talking about this, and it was interesting. We all do it every 5 years, but I think the interconnectivity between every organization and where it goes from there kind of gets lost, right? There isn't something that we're mandated to do it, but what do we get back out of it, right? Is there a grant coming back from there? Is there something that we can leverage to help us meet that, versus every 5 years you submit it, you put out these aspirational goals, no one comes back and really checks up on you, but that's it and said and done, versus finding some way to connect it. So I would love to talk more about and hopefully work out, how do we develop a community practice around that? Because it's not just us, it's also within higher education, through all the BPS. So there's some way to leverage that to kind of say, great, if we guys submit it, what are we getting back out of it, right? To help commit towards that and hopefully get funding out of that.
Yeah, Dr. Ballon last year, if you were at the forum last year, she spoke about engaging with government. And just for interest, after that, she called me and said, could we edit what she said? Because it's going on the recording, but you know what I mean? And her sense of, you know, in a mature way, and you're right, what's in it for them? Governments are very straightforward. They just want to get elected, right? So it's got to be popular and it's got to make sense. But what can the hospitals take to the government that's a win-win that works on both of them? Cliff, you're going to pick this up.
Yeah, I was going to say that this was some of the earlier discussion we had in preparation, but it's starting to see, I see an emerging trend, which is when we talk about Accreditation Canada, and we're talking about the why, and we're seeing the impact of climate change on human health and what it's going to be doing to the healthcare system in the future. And I think what's interesting about that is that what we're starting to see is that it was a lot about delivering services, healthcare services, and not realizing the damage that we were doing through our facilities to the human health and contributing to this. And I think it's we're waking up and realizing our health of our staff is also really important. And that's where we start to see well certification coming in here, creating the environment. So we are seeing this emergence coming that wasn't here 5 years ago. We were still talking a lot about facilities and not getting attention. We're getting the attention now of a lot of different, I will say, leaders and governors saying, we need to do something about this. One of the things that we did on South Niagara, and we're doing it again, and Infrastructure Ontario supports this, is a climate resiliency report. It actually looks at your physical infrastructure and the change of climate and what it will mean in 2050 or 2080 if we don't achieve these. And because you basically have to protect the asset. It's scary. I mean, when you really look at it, and we talked about the glass building, like the demand for cooling is phenomenal. The amount of electricity we would need to do these buildings, phenomenal. That's another way of approaching this. I talked about doing a report that set goals for your project, but also taking a report and looking at what your assets will be like in 20 years or 30 years. It sends shockwaves through the organization. And when you present that to the decision or to the leaders in your governance models, they wake up to realize if we don't do something, this is not something that's happening out there, it's happening right here.
We have time for one more question from the floor, if there are any, and then from here, I'll ask each of the panelists from beginning with Anita and going across, just for closing thoughts. What are the takeaways that everybody goes into lunch with that you'll remember forever? After that, we're going to ask Julian from Enbridge Gas just kind of reflect on what he's heard and kind of give us an update on, because that's one key area of support is coming from the utility companies, and we'd shown that previously, the new frameworks for both the ISO and Enbridge Gas, they're coming together, much bigger targets, likely much bigger incentives. So all of this is part of the weaving together. But is the one final question from the floor that
Thank you. Hi, my name is Geeta. I'm from Ecosystem. The question that I had here for all the healthcare facility leaders are, what are your thoughts on collaborating with external stakeholders? You know, while you have internal committees with various functions and various interests, what are your ideas or the ways you collaborate with external stakeholders so that the interests are aligned and everyone's actually working on the same goal?
So with the timing in mind, let's, Go ahead, Cal.
I think I put the question back to you guys. How are you collaborating? One of the biggest challenges I would say for us within the broad public sector is money, time. And so we look at, when talking about the private sector, is really saying, if you work together and you bring those solutions to us, right, especially when you got RFPs going out, RFX going out, and there's a collaboration there to find best ways to maximize tax dollars, then that becomes a lot easier from a procurement standpoint to kind of go, that's a joint solution. That's going to provide benefits towards the organization, and therefore that's in the best interest of the organization in regards to tax dollars, money. So for us to sit back and spend resources, energy to figure that out, some of us are doing that, but that's also time and energy. That's some things we've been talking about throughout this forum today is a challenge. So if industry's doing that and being forward thinking, I think there's so much benefit that organizations, private organizations would maximize from, and also definitely us who are within the public sector. So those type of collaborations, I would love to see more of it, where it's joint ventures. We see it already happening with architectural firms. Joint ventures are always happening, but from a lot of the groups here, from equipment, services, suppliers, stuff like that, if that kind of collaboration happened, I think we see a lot more benefits and a value coming back to organizations such as within the healthcare industry.
Yeah, I see Andrew picking up that, and I was going to ask you the question as well, because you've been very good at this, at getting a group of allies that help you succeed.
Yeah, I love collaboration. I don't think I have the answers to all the questions. I know there are experts that have been doing this far longer and have been in buildings greater than the buildings that I have been in. So if you are out there and can bring solutions, by all means, we're looking for those things. Because again, everything that we save goes back into the healthcare bucket, whether it comes back directly into my cachet of dollars I can spend, or whether it goes to other clinical focuses. We need to find them. We need to unlock them, and your slides clearly say they're there. So if I haven't already found them, if my team hasn't already found them, I'm always looking to collaborate. Anybody who's came after me at a hospital that I worked at will see that I leave dozens of studies everywhere that I go. I look at Russ, and I know you're reading through all of my studies, because you can't get to a solution without a deep dive audit. But up front, you've got to be able to come with something, as Kyle said, cost effective. If you want to come in and try to prove to me that there's a pilot that makes sense, you're going to have to come with a cost effective first dialogue to get me to bite, so that it makes sense to me to invest the time, the effort into moving forward. Because again, that first investment there could be 20 of those opportunities out there. Who can come to the table knowing that to get skin in the game, they're going to have to put some effort in to get us roped in, so that we can start to do the championing with all the other multidisciplinary teams, and then get this sold.
That's very helpful. As you say, the onus really is on industry to think about how can you help the hospitals, not just to pitch. So Anita, closing thoughts.
So I'm going to pick responsibility, and just everything we've seen. We are in this room, so we're the ones who not only have the agency, but have the understanding of how to decarbonize the health system. And it really is our responsibility, because we are in the business of delivering healthcare, but at the same time, our activities are actually worsening the climate crisis. So I think we've seen lots of opportunities, but it's now our responsibility to actually go forward with those.
Yeah, I think once again, connecting back to patient care and staff wellness, I think if you learn to leverage that, to kind of understand that without our infrastructure in our buildings, you can't do those things. So that support to do that, to make sure that we're able to operate them and maintain them in an environmentally sustainable way, and just keep pushing that narrative. And then once again, your boots on the ground team, you know, when I speak to my team, it's always 1-3-1. Bring me one problem, 3 solutions, and 1 recommendation. And I think that's how we have to kind of look at this challenge, to really go, what are we focusing on? Let's get taken care of and keep on talking. And then lastly, just communities of practice. We have to, you know, we have these great forums, and thank you for doing this, but it's after the fact. What's happening every month? Not just once a year, not quarterly. What's happening every month where we're bringing that type of engagement discussion? I'm hoping that through, you know, collision here, something can be developed so that we keep this going, so we can solve problems. And I'll be reaching out to that individual to come audit me as well.
Excellent. Andrew.
Final thoughts. The conversation was great. The dialogue needs to continue to happen. I see lots of champions in this room, but you've got to find the boots on the ground champions at your organizations, because we're all very, very busy. They're not only going to be in the back of the house, in the operations and the housekeeping, they're going to be with the clinical teams. They're there. They are getting very sophisticated. They want to help and support. You just have to unlock what they can do to help.
Cliff Harvey, the last word to you.
Always enjoyed doing these, because it makes me think and start to put things together, especially when we see what's emerging coming. All really great advice in terms of understanding how to solve the problem. But I do think one of the things that I do see, and I think Matt's discussion about the toothpick is an important one, is because there's a lot of things going on right now. Like, we do see committees, we start seeing like sustainability goals, we start talking about climate resiliency, there's a panic. It's always like, don't let a good crisis go to waste kind of attitude. And for me, it's sort of like having a master plan that tries to connect everything. We have this roadmap, which is 8 feet tall, 30 feet long. It writes out everything that we need to do. It has 18 different work streams. One of those is environmental. 10 years ago, that environmental would be a linear process and be one person working on it. That's there now because it goes across and it goes down to every single other work stream. And how do you get yourself organized? And to me, that's the toothpick. It's like, we have that goal, it's in our DNA, it's gotta be in our DNA. And the why is emerging. We knew it was there a long time ago. We knew climate change was gonna be, but the why is really coming out because it's saying it's impacting human health, and that's what we do. We're here to address human health and make people healthy, restore them back, give them back their lives. And we're causing some of this. We've got to figure out how we can get better. And to me, that's the thing that wasn't there 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And it's here now, and we should capitalize on that in our organizations. Still need the boots on the ground, but we're getting the why is becoming very clear to our leaders, to our CEOs, and to our governors as well. And that's exciting because that's what we've been asking for about, what, 20 years? So thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the introduction to this panel was, we need a call to action. It's always nice to think and talk and look at these things, but we need to go away and act, and you've done a fantastic job of pulling this together. Thank you for that. I think in the interest of moving around, if you could stay put just to the end. Julian, are you here? I've been looking for you. There we go. So we've asked Enbridge Gas, who's been a supporter of greening healthcare for the whole 20 years. They've been with us all the way through and adjusting and adapting what they do along the way. And Julian's going to give us a kind of overview of where they're at for 5 minutes, and then it's lunchtime, and then we'll be back at 1 o'clock. So Julian, over to you, and share your thoughts, and then everybody breaks, and you get to lunch first.
How do I go next slide? Ian?
Yeah, just the green. Green? Okay. Yep.
Hi, everyone. I know I'm standing between us and lunch, and all this sandwich talks really got me hungry too, so I only have like 3 slides to go through. I just want to do a quick incentive update for Enbridge. So my name is Julian. I'm a senior energy advisor at Enbridge. I've been there for about 7 years, and essentially I've been in this role the whole time. And my job is to help you guys identify energy projects, and the most important part is pursue the incentives and get the maximum amount of funding available for those projects, right? And help you develop a business case to do those projects. I'm here with my colleague, Adam Trella. So Adam, can you stand up? And between both of us, we handle all of Ontario, all the hospitals in Ontario. So everyone in this room, you're talking to either one of us. So really quick, I mean, the panel touched on this a little bit already. Holistically, it makes sense to try to shrink our energy usage of our assets and our buildings as small as possible before we start doing some larger capital projects, right? That way we avoid spending money on assets and capacity that maybe we don't even need, right? And so our incentive programs are kind of designed to try to help you along that journey at every stage of the way, whether that's doing small in-year stuff or, you know, reaching for the sky and doing that heat recovery chiller project. So what are our incentives right now? So first off, we have the energy assessment incentives. This is audit funding, and typically this is going to be $10,000 per audit, up to 50% of the audit cost. Okay. Once you've done the audit and it's identified some great measures to implement, we also have capital funding available, and that's 25 cents per M cubed for the first 400,000 M cubes of savings generated from that project. Every M cubed beyond that gets 10 cents per M cubed, up to a max of $500,000 per project. You don't have to use both of these, okay? You can just do an audit, get funding for that. You can just do a capital project, get funding for that, or you can use both of them. Another interesting or important distinction I'll make here is there's no M&V to these savings. These are all engineered, calculated savings that we do that are audited by the Ontario Energy Board. So these are real savings. We're a bit conservative, obviously, but these are real savings that you can take to the bank, and that incentive value is something you can take to the bank too once we quote you that incentive. So get us involved early. And just as an example, some quick wins projects that, you know, we support that you could do, right, on the OpEx side: steam trap audits, steam trap replacements, controls audits and improvements like ventilation reduction, sequence of operations improvements. It could be duct sealing. These like within year quick turnaround projects, we'll support those, right? We'll support the audit to do those and the feasibility studies as required. But what if you're reaching for the stars and doing a multi-year project like a heat recovery chiller project, wastewater heat recovery project, a heat pump project? We support those as well. And if you want to develop that business case 3-4 years out from when that project's going to be implemented, you should absolutely work with us. We'll quote you the incentive 3 years out from that project, develop the business case with you to get approval for that project, and that incentive you can take to the bank. We will honor that incentive 3 years out from that project being done. And our incentives historically have only gone up, so it's likely you might get more money by the time the project's actually implemented. And this is my final slide. We have a limited time offer for steam systems right now. So typically you would get 50% of the audit costs back and 50% of the steam trap replacement costs back. So now if you do a steam trap audit prior to March 31st of next year, you will get 75% of the audit costs back. On top of that, if you do an installation, so a steam system installation project, which could be like valves, fittings, pipe, whatever, instead of getting 25 cents per M cubed, you're getting 40 cents per M cubed, so about 50% higher incentive to do a steam installation project. So 50% of the audit costs you're going to get back, 50% of the replacement costs you're usually going to get back. Sorry, I should say 75% of the audit costs you're going to get back with this offer. And then you'll probably get 50% of the installation costs back as well. So whoever your preferred vendor is for steam trap audits, work with them. Typically at no cost, they will also review your installation at the same time as doing the steam trap audit, right? They're looking for failed traps. They'll also say, hey, yeah, no problem. We can look at the installation of your system, quote you a price, quote you a savings, work with Enbridge to get you the incentive. So they can kind of wrap that all into the steam trap audit that you're going to be doing anyways. So definitely take advantage of this. And that's it. That's my contact. You don't have to memorize any of this. Just email me, and Adam and I will guide you through the whole process. We'll make sure you get the maximum amount of funding available. Thanks.
Thank you, Julian. And again, you see Julian and Adam at the table over there. Connect with them. After the break, we'll have the Decarbonizing Existing Hospitals panel, which you're going to love. And they have these, what are these low-hanging fruit, the simple things we can do tomorrow. And again, we need to be doing things tomorrow. So we're back at 1 o'clock for that panel. Meanwhile, you've gone above and beyond as well, executive panel, everything we hope for and more in this conversation. Thanks everybody here for engaging in that discussion, and please join me in thanking and recognizing our panel.